Thank you very much, everyone, and welcome back. Glad that you made it for the second and most exciting part of the day. So let's have a little bit of a chat about capital projects and construction. Yesterday we talked, we touched briefly on risk and risk management. Interestingly, this is a source of I guess, discussion that we've had with a number of organizations. But as you can see from the red line, the productivity in construction and engineering services is actually declining. Whereas everyone else, wholesale, retail, manufacturing, agriculture, is increasing. So there's a significant impact, obviously, on your capital projects if the construction side of any capital project productivity is declining. There has to be some issues and some cause for concern. Interestingly, earlier this year at another very exciting conference called The Future of Mining Finance, I don't know where they got that idea, but I'm sure that they borrowed some of the thoughts from this series of conferences. But the Capital Resource Funds discussed a study that they had recently done over the last 10 years of all of the different projects that they finance. And of all of the different projects, roughly 100, 0 had come in on budget and on schedule. Interesting, over the last 10 years. As well, PMI, which is the Project Management Institute, a global institute, conducted every year they conduct a survey called the Pulse of the Industry. Last year, in 2018, they reviewed 4,500 projects worldwide on all infrastructure, and 50% of all of those projects were completed on time, as reported by the project manager. Less than 60% achieved budget. Less than 10% achieved both budget and schedule. So it seems like there may be a trend here, one that the Economist has identified since 1947. We're basically at the same productivity that we were after the Second World War. Amazing. Or interesting. And so what are some of the reasons for that, and what are some of the impacts? Well, obviously, a delay in schedule or in budget of a major capital project has a significant impact on any of the mining companies that are funding that. And that could translate into share price impact. It could impact the project NPV. In fact, when we recently were doing a calculation for a pressure oxidization plant that was going to take that move from a heap leach operation into from the oxide ore body into a sulfide ore body, with average gold grades, with typical recoveries, $500 million plant. It was actually $450 million plant. A delay of 1 week was equal to roughly $500,000. A 2-week delay is $1 million. You know, you can do the math, it's easy. So if you have a 2-week delay on a relatively, sort of normal $500 million, $500 million gold plant, and that's $1 million, that can eat away at your NPV pretty quickly. So it potentially has a shareholder value issue. There's a huge operational risk. And are we paying enough attention? So there's a white paper that's CIM is going to present. Roy Slack, who's the former former CEO of cementation, shared it with us because this is something that we're also concerned with. The white paper was done by an engineering faculty member out of the University of Toronto, and he reviewed infrastructure projects and on an international basis, and some of the trends that he found. The larger the project, the more likely it will go over budget. Does that make sense? Absolutely. The main drivers of cost overruns: technical challenges that were not well understood, over-optimism, and strategic misrepresentations. His words, not mine. So if you're trying to get your project funded, sometimes you're a little bit over-optimistic, absolutely. And sometimes your sponsor may make a strategic misrepresentation. I don't know what that actually means. From a consulting point of view, that's either a misrepresentation or it's not. Anyway, so I believe that's being termed as being a little bit economical with the truth. So many and most technical challenges can be anticipated and controlled. Budgeting and scheduling can improve over time. So typically when we were working with Valet in Indonesia, and they have basically $1 billion to spend over 3 years. One of the things that they said was, listen, we're happy to fund a $300 million spend in the first year. And you should get a little bit smarter in the second year. So the following year, it should be $270 million. And in the third year, it should be $250,000. We expect that over the 3 years, you're going to get a little bit smarter, and you'll be able to sharpen your pen, and you'll be able to do things better. That makes sense. You know, in manufacturing, in most businesses, you expect, over a period of time to get a little bit smarter. And that's typically not what's happening. Is typically as projects progress along its timeline, they get more expensive, and we find other issues. There is some historical learnings that we could apply, but we're not applying to capital projects. And one of them is that we have a tendency to underestimate costs at the beginning, and we have a tendency to put the stake in the ground, and then we don't necessarily move the stake. One of the main issues that the Project Management Institute cites as a significant contributor to the schedule and budget is the client sponsorship or the executive sponsorship of a capital project. So certainly if we're thinking about, okay, we're going to do these capital projects, one of the things that we have to fix is certainly the design. Another one is how we budget and schedule. And a third one is how closely we maintain the sponsorship of the executive. We're doing a number of projects right now with a number of organizations around implementation, ramp-ups, and capital project management. And one of the things that we're providing them, and by the way, I think that all of the discussion around digital platforms and digital solutions is great, especially around sharing of information and making the information both transparent and having a single source. So having a single source of truth is really important, especially if you're going to have an EPCM and a contractor and an owner's team all discussing relevant points. It's good that they all share the same information source and can agree what the information is. Management, for whatever reason, in capital projects, we're not doing as good a job at planning and scheduling work as we are during operations. So in operations, we're actually very good at, or most mining companies are very good at planning and scheduling work. However, for whatever reason, at the capital project side of things, when we're employing contractors, we are not necessarily requiring the same level of detail and planning of work that's being done. In fact, the milestone planning has a tendency to be around weeks as opposed to days. And sometimes it's not even weeks, it's months that we're going to continue to do the same thing day after day after day, and then we're going to hit this milestone. So as a practical point of view, asking the contractor and to employ the same type of planning and scheduling techniques that are already being used is a good thing. Talking to Roy, one of the first things that Roy talks about, and we would agree with, is that safety is a great first step in having a successful project. And one of the reasons, the main reason is that unsafe work is work that's unplanned. Unplanned work is, as we talked about yesterday, 3 times more likely to result in an accident or environmental incident, and it's 10 times more expensive. So when you don't plan at a detailed level, it's automatically going to be unsafe, more likely to result in an accident or incident, and less productive. So if we're talking about capital projects and the fact that less than 50% come in on budget and on schedule, and we're saying that that's an issue from a stakeholder point of view and then from a project NPF point of view and NPV point of view, and if we're saying one of the things that we have to do to fix that is to plan better, then I suggest that we start, putting safety first and talking about how we can plan better. The role of the project manager is becoming a lot more complex. And yesterday when we were talking about risk, we talked about social license to operate. In many cases, the construction contractor and the EPCM are the first people on the ground. They are the first people that are dealing with the community. And so they are setting expectations that the community is now going to have of the mining company. How well are we working with the EPCM and the contracting companies in terms of how they are representing us as a social license to operate discussion? Because, after they leave and the owner's team comes in, the community is not going to be able to differentiate between the EPCM that came in and built the plant and put in the infrastructure and the people that are operating it. That's not going to matter to them. And if there was an issue that the EPCM or the contractor created, that's something that the owner's team is going to have to deal with. Here's some of the guidelines that the Project Management Institute comes up with. And by the way, we would agree. Executive sponsors and the closeness that they have and the integration that they have with the capital project is very important. And it's always good for them to be able to understand the nuances and the issues that are being dealt with, especially if we're working on a no surprises type of thing. They can use their influence within the organization to overcome problems, and as well they are better to, if you will, bring in the force of their position to help overcome some of the issues that sometimes occur between the operator and the contractor and the EPCM, which the project manager can't necessarily solve himself or herself. There's a procurement and supply chain component to engaging a contracting firm and as well an EPCM. And there are some guidelines around best practices. After you've made your decision around whether this is going to be a time and materials thing or whether you're going to download the risk of the operation to the contracting EPCM by making it a turnkey operation, there are some things that you have to look at how you manage. One of the things that is not necessarily best practice is asking the procurement organization to manage the EPCM. That's not their ability. That's not something that's necessarily in your own best interest. Trying to manage using contractual terms as opposed to sitting down and looking at a schedule and managing people on a person-to-person basis. The contracting firm is going to respond well to penalties and things like that, but not necessarily in the way that you want. So it's best not to turn over the management of any of your capital projects to your procurement function. We have been acting as a third-party coach to some of the procurement and, some of the contracting and owners teams, and actually that's being very successful. It's helping to overcome some of the issues, and it's also getting some understanding across the two divides. It's helping to create common language and proactive management behaviors. Some of the contractors are very good at design, and some of them are very good at execution, and some of them are very good at both. And typically the owners team and the EPCM, having an ability to work together actually will make the project run more successfully. Scheduling ahead, a week ahead, where 72 hours ahead is sort of like the minimum. If you look at the industry best practice, we've recently done some work in turnarounds and shutdowns with industrial chemical companies in the United States. They have a 6-week shutdown, which costs roughly about $100 million. That's both, and their shutdown comes from when they're able to create commercial saleable product to when they're able to create it again. The gap in between is that 6-week period. They start planning that shutdown 24 months in advance. They shut off the scope 9 months in advance. So essentially, they have 9 months where the scope is not going to change and that they can start planning for that 6-week shutdown. Now, that sounds like that should give you enough time. There's still some productivity issues, but not very many. And they're dealing with, yes, they're dealing with caustic chemicals. I mean, this is chlorines, this is epoxies and things like that. Yes, they're dealing with caustic materials. Yes, they're dealing with enclosed spaces, confined space, all those types of things. But if you think about it, that there's a huge opportunity around mining to come to somewhat of that industry standard to say, we should be planning not necessarily 9 months in advance, but maybe we're going to plan 6 weeks or a month in advance and lock that schedule in and make sure that you have the tools, that you have the materials on site, the equipment on site to be able to do that work. Any questions? None. Of all the engineers that are in the room, let's have a show of hands. Agree or disagree? Everybody that agrees with these findings, raise your hand. Well, we got half a dozen. Everybody that disagrees. Let it be said that there's no disagreement. Yes, Max. Absolutely. By the way, Max is IBM, but he used to be Worley Parsons, just so we know. Full disclosure.
Right. So with all these major capital projects going on around the world, in oil and gas and mining, probably back in 2010, that was a time in Australia where we had the world's largest and maximum number of major capital projects. The world saw the biggest delays in major capital projects, tens of billions of dollars in Australia. Now today, when you talk to project owners, they want to bring in technologies. And in your view as Proudfoot, are you, together with your partners, bringing newer technologies to be able to predict the schedule, the costs, and the management of projects within a large program better?
I'll just briefly rephrase, just in case you didn't hear. So Max was citing the fact that roughly 10 years ago, there was a number of large infrastructure projects which were significantly delayed, not only in Australia but worldwide. And since then, a lot of project owners are looking at challenging that gap between schedule and budget with technology. So the response would be absolutely, technology is a great solution. But what we've seen, and by the way, we've helped a major Asian airline implement a digital maintenance solution in their aircraft hangar. We found that the technology and the tablet that we were going to use and the information on the tablet, that was all solved in the first year. 3 years later, they were still trying to get people to use it. Now, that had everything to do with the people side and nothing to do with the technology. The technology was already fully robust. The digital solution was already there. What was happening was that supervisors did not see their new role, which was to solve problems, as something that they were comfortable with. They wanted to assign work. And one of the digital solutions was that the worker could choose his work as long as he was qualified to do the work. So there was a bunch of human side of things that got in the way of the digital. What we're finding is that there are actually fully robust digital solutions around project planning, around project scheduling, and you can transfer that information. You can create work orders. You can use the timelines and update where you were. I mean, this is not just Microsoft Project. This is actually a fully robust, working, planning system, but people aren't using it. And why is that? So I think that Max, to your point, digital solutions are a great thing. Barrick, supplied a digital solution to the underground mining, in Nevada. They didn't get the productivity increase because it wasn't so much that there was nothing wrong with the digital solution. There was a problem with the implementation and the take-up and the use and the understanding, why do you want me to do this? So I think that it's great to have the gap that we are dealing with has got to be dealt with at the owner's level. They have to be more requiring. We have to talk about why transparency around what the schedule is that the EPCM is sharing, why that is good. I mean, EPCMs, people don't want to give you bad news, so they save up all the bad news and they give it to you in pieces, as opposed to saying, well, on a daily basis, let's track where our schedule is. And I guess expectations should sort of change as well. Understand that we designed a solution at a point in time, and how iterative is that design allowed to be? And then how iterative is that budgeting process allowed to be? Are we actually do we have the correct expectations for what a capital project should look like? Okay, I think my time is done. Thank you very much.